Welcome to The Explainer. So, let's just dive right into this. Today, we're exploring a completely counterintuitive, but honestly, life-changing premise. It's this idea that in highly uncertain environments, simple rules absolutely crush complex models. Whether we're talking about the whole global financial system, trying to predict foreign exchange rates, or just, managing your own retirement savings, the prevailing wisdom has always kind of been that a complex world demands complex solutions, right? But the data actually tells a completely different story. So today, we're going to see how embracing minimalist rules is literally the ultimate key to true financial stability.
To really understand why this is, I want to start with a seemingly unrelated question. How does a dog catch a frisbee? Seriously, think about it. If a physicist were to write down the optimal control problem for catching a frisbee, they'd have to account for wind speed, rotation, Newton's law of gravity. It's incredibly complex. Yet, just watch a dog at the park, especially a border collie, and they do it perfectly, every single time. Why? Well, because the dog isn't doing complex physics. Studies show the dog just follows one incredibly simple rule of thumb. Run at a speed so that the angle of your gaze to the frisbee remains roughly constant. It's a brilliantly simple heuristic, and as you'll see, humans and markets operate exactly the same way.
This actually brilliantly illustrates a core divide in economic thinking. On one hand, we have decision-making under risk. This is the world of traditional academic models, like the Arrow-Debreu model, where we assume we can perfectly calculate the probability of future events, like rolling a die. But the real world, the one we actually live in, is categorized by uncertainty. This is true ignorance about what's coming next. In a messy, uncertain environment, a highly complex state contingent rule almost always fails. Instead, as brilliant minds like Richard Feynman and Herbert Simon realized, complex environments don't demand complex equations. They actually demand simple, robust heuristics.
Now, this isn't just some fun theory. The Bank of England recently published a massive, landmark paper by Andrew Haldane, their executive director for financial stability at the time. And he anchored this exact frisbee logic directly into how central banks handle global financial crises. He points out that efforts to catch the crisis frisbee have just escalated in complexity, but those complex models completely failed to predict the 2008 global financial crisis. The secret behind the failure was the complexity itself. When it comes to financial regulation, less might actually be way more.
Part 1. The Index Card Economy. So let's zoom in to the micro level for a second. Your personal finances. Back in 2013, an academic named Harold Pollack famously claimed in an interview that literally all the financial advice you will ever need could fit on a single 4x6 index card. People challenged him on it, so he took 2 minutes, grabbed a card, jotted down some basic rules, snapped a photo, and the thing went completely viral. The core argument here is that if you're paying someone for complex financial advice, you're probably getting the wrong advice, because the right advice is aggressively simple. Let's break down these rules. They're unsexy, but man, they are brutally effective. Number 1, spend less than you earn. If you violate this, the whole shebang collapses. Number 2, buy low-cost index funds. Just put your idle dollars to work. Number 3, build a financial moat, meaning a 3 to 6 month emergency fund to protect you from unexpected shocks. Number 4, destroy high-interest debt aggressively. And number 5, design your life around enough. Financial stability isn't a complex puzzle. It's really just consistently doing these unsexy things for a really long time. So you might be wondering, just how much better are these simple rules? Well, consider this massive number, 250 years. That's 3,000 months. According to research highlighted by the Bank of England, this is the amount of historical data you would actually need for a complex asset pricing model to consistently beat a simple equal-weight portfolio strategy out in the wild. And since our sample sizes in the real world are relatively small, simple rules, like basic index investing, almost always outperform complex active optimization. Basically, unless you have 3 millennia of data lying around, less is unequivocally more.
Which brings us to Part 2, forecasting the unpredictable.
Let's zoom back out from personal finance to the global macroeconomic level and look at predicting foreign exchange rates. Now, this is an arena where brilliant analysts and highly sophisticated algorithms consistently fall victim to their own hubris. The data we're exploring comes from recent Federal Reserve Board research on exchange rate predictability. Researchers literally pitted sophisticated, nonlinear machine learning models, specifically ridge regressions with random Fourier features, against simple linear regressions and the incredibly basic random walk model. And the random walk just assumes the exchange rate basically won't change. So what was the result? Well, the highly complex machine learning models only showed localized gains in tiny samples. But as the sample size grew, the simple linear regression and the basic random walk consistently dominated. proving once again that in economics, high nominal complexity is often just a mirage. Let's actually walk through the exact mechanics of why these complex algorithms fail on us. Step 1, high complexity requires massive samples to properly calibrate. We established that. Step 2, because our real-world samples are almost always too short, the models resort to overfitting. Step 3, as they overfit, statistical noise is tragically mistaken for an actual economic signal. And finally, step 4, because the model is chasing statistical breezes, its predictions about the future become completely fragile. What looks like an absolute masterpiece on a spreadsheet completely falls apart in the real world.
Moving right along to part 3, the Tower of Basel.
Now, let's apply this exact same simplicity principle to the international banking system, or what Andrew Haldane calls the Tower of Basel. Back in 1988, we had Basel I. It was a landmark international agreement for banking regulations, and it was only 30 pages long. You could literally calculate a bank's regulatory capital ratios with a pad and a pen. Fast forward to 2004 with Basel II. The rulebook jumped to 347 pages because it started encouraging banks to use complex internal risk models. And by Basel III, we're dealing with a framework that requires millions of parameters. Millions. We built this incredibly complex beast to try and tame a complex financial system. But did it actually make us safer?
Well, when researchers tested these rules against actual bank failures, the results were pretty staggering. It turns out, a simple, straightforward, quantity-based rule, like the basic leverage ratio, has about 10 times the predictive power of a bank's failure compared to the highly complex, risk-weighted Tier 1 capital ratio. However, while those complex million-parameter rules perform in theory, they perform absolutely miserably out in the real world when a crisis actually strikes.
But we have to ask, why does complexity fail so spectacularly in practice? It's because complex rules induce defensive behavior. Think about doctors for a second. When they face a massive complex rulebook, they often end up overprescribing and overdiagnosing just to avoid litigation, which can actually end up harming the patient. And you know what? The exact same thing is true for banks. When faced with millions of regulatory parameters, they just manage the fine print. They focus entirely on ticking the regulatory boxes instead of actually managing real-world risk. They completely miss the forest for the trees.
And that brings us to part 4, the anti-fragile advantage.
So, from your personal bank account to global exchange rates and international banking regulations, we've seen that parsimony wins. Keeping it simple works. But the real benefit of minimalist rules isn't just basic survival. Enter the concept of being anti-fragile. This was coined by researcher Nassim Taleb, who actually spent 20 years as a financial trader. And anti-fragility goes way beyond mere resiliency. You see, an anti-fragile system doesn't just survive a shock. It actually thrives, flourishes, and gains from unpredictable conditions and disorder. By utilizing simple, robust rules, like, say, maintaining a personal financial moat, or forcing banks to adhere to simple leverage limits, you aren't just protecting yourself. You're actually putting yourself in a position to positively harvest luck and capitalize on unpredictable black swan events.
Which brings us to this incredibly powerful quote highlighted in the Bank of England's analysis, from none other than Albert Einstein. He said, "The problems that exist in the world today cannot be solved by the level of thinking that created them. We absolutely cannot fight complexity with more complexity. Whether it's a central bank trying to prevent the next major crash, or just you trying to build a solid retirement portfolio, attempting to outcalculate the future is a trap. We have to abandon this illusion of complex control if we want to survive a complex world."
Which leaves us with one final deeply personal question to wrap up this explainer. What does enough mean to you? Because the truest form of financial stability, the real foundation of those minimalist index card rules we talked about, is defining your finish line and refusing to let the world move it. True wealth isn't some complicated algorithm. It isn't a million-parameter risk model. It's adopting simple rules, applying massive discipline, and deciding for yourself when you've won the game. So I'm going to leave you with that to think about. Define your enough, keep your rules simple, and just watch how stable your world becomes. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.